Hey everybody, Seabug.
Hey, whoa.
My name's Oscar Beckler. I teach at Lake Washington. I've been doing this this is going to be our 10-year anniversary in like October or so. So let's start building a party fund now. And yeah, this is Seabug, the Seattle Blender user group. It's free, it's open source. It talks about free and open source stuff. And today we're going to look at some cool stuff in Blender. And first off, who else is here?
Missouri. I've been coming to Seabug for a couple years now, and I have some cool stuff to show today. So yeah.
I'm Joey. I've been coming to Seabug for a really long time.
Hey, I'm Alan. I've only been here about 3 years now, so I'm just using it. But, yeah, I just play with this stuff. I'm retired, so. That's new. No, I saved my software money.
I'm assuming for that you meant money that you would have spent on software.
You want to sponsor us, Alan?
Pardon me?
You want to sponsor us?
It's barely sponsoring myself.
Let your money be on.
I'm Scott. I guess I was a noob. I just graduated to amateur.
Alright.
Hi, I'm Joshua. I'm a professional 3D artist for video games. I've been doing contract work for a while, and as of last month, I'm full-time at a studio in Belltown.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the studio?
Against Gravity. They work on Rec Room, so I was doing contract work for the studio, and after a year of contract work, I talked to the art director. I'm like, hey, how about full-time, you know? And it's, the nice thing is I history together and do my work, so it was really just making sure I was a good fit for the team.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Well done.
I'm
I
Bob.
use Blender.
I don't know, I've been doing Blender quite a long time.
I'm Brett, programmer and Blender hobbyist.
I'm Clayton. This is my first time here.
Welcome.
I discovered Blender about 6 months ago. I'm having fun. Probably could connect.
Fantastic.
Richard. I'm new here. I'm just trying to learn a little bit about the program and hopefully create something.
I'm Soraya. I'm a student of Oscar in Lake Washington. And it's the first time here I'm trying to learn Blender.
Alright.
I'm Jimmer. I do 3D printing things in Blender. And so are you saying this is not from the sponsor? This is from Oscar. It's not.
This is from Joey.
Oh, this is from Joey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joey.
He's our sponsor today. Yeah, Joey.
Oh.
Donuts. Nice sugar rush to stay awake. Well, cool. Let's talk about what we're doing today. Number one, what is Blender? Your first step should be to go to builder.blender.org, and that's what we do here. We're on cutting edge, hot edge of the knife, super fresh builds. So get the first one here. Let me ask around if you have trouble logging in.
There's computer already has it.
Your computer might already have it. I don't know.
Well, your computer already has it on the desktop.
Once you get this, you're going to find where it went, which is probably somewhere in the downloads folder. You'll unzip it, and inside of that will be a folder which has Blender in it.
I unzipped it to the desktop.
So if you come up here to use the presenting computer, you can know that Windows D collapses to the desktop, and here's that folder. Blender 2.8. What are we doing today? I think, I guess I'm just going to dive into it. We don't need an itinerary. Although I am checking every once in a while to make sure I'm still streaming. Today I wanted to talk about architectural design, I guess, and some of that stuff. So for the book I'm working on, I'm doing a chapter, and I just impulsively switched the idea to be like a sleek kitchen interior because I was just making every chapter sci-fi stuff. And I was like, we should cover more ground. And also there's just a lot of cool things. So our beloved Zuri is working on the chapter before that, and it's like a modeling chapter. And so kind of the approach that I'm taking with this is that once you've learned some of the important modeling tools, This chapter is going to be a lot of the kit bash dirty tricks and all the other things that you use throughout a pipeline, because there's so many ways that you can do it. So you have giant modifier stacks, you can use add-ons, you can use groups, you can just kit bash out of other people's files using linking and appending. And then a lot of this is going to be, how can you use your collections to like have a really good, well-organized scene. So in Blender, this is our default cube, and perhaps that's an interesting first way to think of it, is like, how can we model without modeling? And my first thought was, what if they made a chair that was just largely that sort of almost IKEA style chair where, you don't even use, by the way, you don't even actually use any modeling tools. It's more that like you model a chair like this. Whee. And so on and so forth. But the main thing I wanted to show off firstly, because it's so fun and it's a really great way to do these architecture projects fast, is some of the new add-ons that just got updated to function in 2.8. So if you've never turned an add-on on before, what you need to do is go to Edit, Preferences.
Oscar, real quick, can you go to your press and bump up the scaling like 1.4, 1.5 so we can read the text from back here?
The DPI.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Ooh. So in the add-ons, there's two new ones that they've been around for a while, but they're updated to 2.8 now. They're Archimesh and Archipack. And they have a lot of fun, really nice tools for architecture stuff. So having turned that on, you can save preference. And you'll notice that there's two different places this shows up. One is that we now have a more conventional to 2.79 modifiers panel over here. And it's funny because like, you can pay money for the joy of playing The Sims, and then it's basically a lot of the same process as this stuff. So what I really enjoy is going to the top view, and you can use a layout thing, but I like to start with my walls. And so when you get this, you get this sort of wall widget. And has anyone used this before? It's really nice. The first thing that you'll notice is you can move these around. You can also type in numbers. So if you know exactly that your wall is 10 feet long, or 10 meters long, you can go that far. I've been using a meter for a lot of stuff. So any sort of oven or like countertop tends to be like 1 meter tall. Is that about right? Question?
I know in the 279 world, we used to have Linder units, which were like a measureless unit. Is it default?
This is default meters now. Really, really lovely. So Chewbacca is 2 meters tall. The average human is 1.8. There's a countertop is about 1 meter long. And what I love is that I think like that tends to be the more standardized thing for a lot of architecture. So I would also just like to mention that as far as planning for this, I just want to sing the praises of books, because I was doing the classic thing of like, all right, get on the internet, Google 100 pictures of nice kitchen. And IKEA, oh man, look at all this reference. And I would save all this in our giant mood board document. And then to look at my reference, I would have to get on the internet, and then because I'm on the internet, I would be a total slob and just waste my time. And I was in the library here at Lake Washington. I found this awesome book, this Taschen books. All Taschen books are great. And it's just like sleek, neat interior, or like case studies of LA houses from the 1950s through 60s. And it's just got wonderful, wonderful stuff. But the other thing that's great is the benefit of a real physical object like this is all the resources that come together with it. So on one hand, we can see the beautiful image and the living room or kitchen that you're looking at. But then you flip the page and they actually have like the top-down floor layout. And so I'm not trying to like copy it explicitly, but it's really nice that I could just import that image and go right off of that. So to talk about this widget more, the other thing you can do is click on these numbers and literally type it in. This is very un-Blender in a certain way in that it's such an exposed interface and not like the other modeling tools. And then from here, so now I have a 4-foot tall wall, or a 4-meter tall wall. I can say it's 0.1 meter thick, and then 10 feet long. And the other thing is that you'll notice over here, there's this double arrow. So this arrow moves the length of these. And these arrows will help you get new stuff. So if I turn that, you'll notice that it created a right angle. I'll redo this. Oh, never mind, I remember. So if I say this is 10, so I was just like, wait, I want it to go the other way. And the thing you do is you change the angle. So we'll set this to -90. And now it's going that way. And in this fashion, you can sort of get a layout pretty fast. Now under the hood, this is just a plane. I hit tab to go to edit mode. It's just a plane with a solidify modifier on it. Nothing that complex about it. But to some extent, it's nice that you can see like all these numbers exactly as they are. Nope. Nope. And of course, I'm sure all the pros are kind of disgusted by this, because why not just go into edit mode and snap to create?
Typing on the numeric values is nice. Otherwise, you have to use a little extrude type of value, extrude type of value.
It has a bunch of other nice things, like doors. Oh, and the other thing is that in your preferences, when you add this add-on, I think there's a button that you're going to want to do, which is right here.
What was that button?
In the settings, it's render preset thumbnails. So it has a bunch of presets, I think. Maybe I just crashed it.
Into the add-on itself, right?
Yeah, and so you can see here, it's sort of rendering all these. I hope. Yeah. While that's rendering, I'm going to launch a different Blender. So if you have just like a really simple thing like this, you can then use slab. I think this is what I want. And this is really nice for things like creating, a kitchen counter or something, a little kitchen island. And the slab is sort of the same interface, but a flat thing. Whoa. And the thing is, like, it'll be attached to this.
You can't toggle back and forth between edit mode and
Yeah.
Didn't like that.
I've almost certainly broken this in like 5 different ways, just playing with it. And then sealing. Hey, instant sealing. I don't know if these are rendered yet. Yeah, you can start to see that some of these are rendered out. So in this other Blender file, it's still probably working on these, but it's creating little thumbnails for the various models that exist. And now I can create a door. And even the door has nice stuff. Yeah, it's fun. Garage, so on and so forth. It's pretty fun.
It's an elephant door.
I don't know.
So you can get the elephant in one.
I'm not saying it's the only thing you should use, but I'm trying to like pitch this chapter as like turn on use every one of the techniques possible to set up a whole house in rapid succession. The other one is Archimesh, which is very similar but different. This one's more about like all the stuff inside of your house. So if you use this one to get like the shell of it, you can then start decorating it with Archimesh.
What was the name of the one we were just looking at?
Archipec. Archipec.
Do you know if there's any licensing thing tied to any of these?
They have I think it's GPL, they have a paid version and you tend to get the earlier version of it. So this was in development for 2.8 for like 2 months and you couldn't get it. So I did the classic thing of writing my chapter, or pecking away at it at least, and playing with this only to discover it was totally broken. And then by the time I had finished writing, they released it finally. So if you were like on their Patreon or something, you can get it for much earlier. And I think they have a more expanded list of stuff. Well, let's check the documentation.
Archimesh is included, but I think Archipec is not yet included. Archimesh at one time was a separate program, but incorporated into.
They're good people and it's really fun and I would recommend supporting them. So yeah, you could pre-buy 2.0.
Pack are by default in at least 2.7 now.
Yeah. It's sort of the classic, nice altruistic Blender users. Pay for it to get developed, and then once that payment is done, they just send it out into the world like a little bird. So to look at some of the other ones, it's cool because these have a lot of the creation moments where you can change the stuff. So cabinet, for instance, totally breaks. Maybe I gotta close this. Hey, it worked. Let's turn off that stupid cube. Okay. There's our cabinet. And you'll notice that it has, like other tools, a moment of creation where you can change a lot of these. So I can change the number of cabinets, and what I hate is that each of these cabinets has their own setting. So as I increase this, it like adds a
your collection grows bigger and bigger.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes you want the cabinets open like this.
Yeah, like-
Not all of them all be right hand open.
Exactly. And you can, I mean, it's so fun. It's just like playing The Sims. So you can change like the handle type. It's not like infinite options, but it's definitely enough to get you started. So like you could do this and then just, if these are all instances of the same cabinet handle, you could just change it to, you know, a glass old-fashioned knob or whatever you want. There's also floor versus wall cabinets up here. And this time I'm going to say floor. Now look at that. Almost done with the entire kitchen.
Where's the sink?
You need a bowl of Fruit Loop.
I don't know. Where's the table with the cloths in?
Where's the
They're all
floor?
exact with textures.
So that's the thing, is it does not necessarily come with materials. So that would be the next thing, is how can you combine this with another kit bash of your giant dragon horde of old materials? So if you look at these in the note,
Not materials for you, so you can easily
yeah.
place them.
Yeah, and then it's pre-sewn ones. I was just making that.
I'm just saying, like when it generates the cabinet, it's not, it's just that.
I mean, it's got a little bit of material. And we could really quick. I don't know if it's. Hopefully, it's not doing it. Yeah. So it's not creating 10 versions of materials, but we can really quick add a texture, a checkerboard texture, and plug that into the base color.
Checkerboard texture?
Yeah.
No, do magic.
Magic text.
A classic
Oh,
look,
wow.
timeless and tasteful.
I would want that in my kitchen.
Gotta turn the depth up a bit on the magic.
You know, this starts off with,
Magic
I think-
actually does cool stuff when it combines with other nodes and things.
I make my own magic.
So is this thing looked at you?
So,
Yeah.
so now you need to have this where it just pre-generates inside a collection, each piece.
I think it probably does, to some extent. Nope, just one collection. So that's not ideal. You can see like it starts off with a glossy texture for the handles. Oh, it's even like got the rig in the right spot. Open these. Put some food in here.
I think that could use a brick texture.
I don't know, it's pretty fun. So I don't know where this is going, but
Well, we're not a
I'm
magic
starting to
contest.
do this.
So you were doing this for your kitchen.
Yeah, I'm basically modeling a bunch of kitchens, and I'm, you know, having like classic noob frustration of I'll create a kitchen and I'm like, it's not quite what I want, so I'll make another kitchen. So I've got like 5 starting kitchens and none finished. At some point, I just have to finish them. It's a terrible way to work. I don't know. The other thing I was going to talk about today is more grease pencil stuff. So over here.
Oh, did the, yeah, the thumbnail's made front, right?
You closed that file.
There. So this is actually, again, using my cheap workaround of beaming a Google Hangouts from my laptop over to this computer, thereby allowing me to show you some of this stuff. I'm over here and I wanted to show you some more grease pencil stuff. I've got what I think is a really ideal setup now for my laptop, and I wanted to talk about some of the constraints of your hardware. So I've been experiencing this problem with grease pencil where I'm using a Windows device. It has a Windows Surface. It's made by N-Trig. It's called Windows Ink. And a lot of times it's just kind of crappy and annoying. And so I've got my grease pencil file set up to a number of things. the first thing I wanted to show you is radial menu. So if you have any sort of Windows Surface, like a Windows Surface, a Dell XPS, I'm on a Lenovo Yoga. A lot of these devices all use the same proprietary Windows, touch and pen interface. And what really, really sucks is this. Yeah. You download all the apps and you can't set this to middle click, which is key in Blender, right? So there's a little program called Radial Menu. And previously I tried it like a couple of years ago and it was not working for me. And they've since updated it and now it works really well. And the trick here is that I never actually use Radial Menu. I just use this to access a proper pen setting. In Radial Menu, it sort of hides here in your Windows menu down there. You're going to right click and you'll notice that I have a lot of this stuff turned off. So it's like activation, none. Or like I changed my activation to be slam every button on my keyboard to activate it. So hopefully it never actually happens. I have to press Control-Alt-Shift-Windows, right mouse. So thankfully it never shows up. However, under remapping, I've changed it so that button 1 is middle mouse and button 2 is right mouse. And then I have like everything else turned off. The other thing that's kind of hard to see is, has anyone used like a stylus interface on a Windows machine? Like a Surface or something? It's so dumb, but they have these really sleek, neat looking pens, and they're awful. The buttons are impossible to find, and they're also the exact same color, so you can't use, they're like formed into the pen manifold, so like you can't actually feel it by touching them, and also you can't feel it, like find it by looking at it because they're not colored. So I ended up gluing some beads to my buttons, and now it's so nice for rotating around in 3D, right?
Such an Oscar kind of solution.
That's so Oscar. Why spend 4 hours working on a Blender file when I can spend 4 hours modifying my pen with a glue gun? So now I have middle mouse click with my pen and right mouse click with my other pen button, and it's just so much easier to find. So I wanted to go into Grease Pencil more. I'm going to create a default file. Whee. There's some Grease Pencil strokes. This is the default animation preset for Grease Pencil. And the first thing I wanted to show you was how I changed my default file. You can always change your default file, or one of the several, by using File, Save Startup File. And so I've modified all of my brushes in one particular way. Another problem with Windows Ink hardware is that they have this sort of activation moment where in the code, somewhere deep down inside, it says, are they clicking or are they drawing? And it's trying to figure out which one to send to Windows. And so this caused this big problem where when I clicked, a lot of times it would register as a click rather than a brush interface at the start. And so it would immediately set my pressure to maximum. So I've changed all of my curves here to have an extreme fall off. So basically, this is no pressure, this is 90% pressure, and this is 100% pressure. So anytime it hits 100% pressure, the pen completely removes it. Just to show you what happens if I turn that off. Let's go back to this. See that nasty little start? So I kept going in, and it would, on the first click, set it to 100%. So this is what I want, but 90% of the time, if I'm just trying to use this like a pencil, it would suddenly set it to maximum. So that's why I did that. So in my default scene now, I have every single brush set to these fall-offs. So draw ink, every single one. Draw block, pencil. The other thing I did, because I just find it to be the best of the smoothing options.
It's a peak with a fast drop off.
Yeah, basically, once it hits 100%, it dies. The other thing that I've done is I've set all my brushes to Active Smooth 1. There's 3 different ways that you can change your smoothing in Blender. I'll start by turning all of these off. So this is with no smoothing. The first one that I don't like because it does a secondary action at the end of your stroke is post-processor settings. So post-processor settings is after I draw this stroke, it'll smooth it once it ends. And the one thing I like about this is oftentimes in Grease Pencil, the problem you run into is sharp turns. So you'll notice that at that sharp turn, the opacity builds up. And this smooth sometimes fixes that a little bit. But I don't like it because it shows up differently. The other one is the stabilizer. And this has that interface like sculpting where it pulls the stroke behind.
Just to reiterate again, the lag is from the screen software, not Blender.
Yeah. It looks different up here. So I can set this to, if I set that to like 200 pixels, you'll really be able to see it. See how it drags behind it? And that one's oftentimes really, really pleasant for anything that's like detail work. So if you're doing something like trying to trace filigree or do cursive writing, that one can be really nice. I tend to be a very messy and like chaotic renderer, so I prefer something that is our third option, which is the best, which is Active Smooth. So Active Smooth just kind of makes it actively kind of a little bit smoother.
That's why it's called Active Smooth.
Yeah, it actively smooths. And then the last thing I've done on my default file is I've created several default materials. So my preference is to have black ink, black flats, and white flats. So I tend to no longer use my pencil tool because I really like just diving in with ink. And the benefit of this is that I can always just reduce the opacity later. It's very similar to what I do in a lot of life drawing, which is when I'm doing gesture drawings, it's really fun to do it with a Sharpie. And with a Sharpie, there is no option except to go diving ahead. It's always going to be thick, it's always going to be black. And so if it's a 30-second drawing, it's really good for getting you out of the sense that like you have to render it slowly. So I can always reduce that. And then create another layer on top of this, which will be my official lines. And at this point, you can go in and be a little more careful. The other thing that you can then do is flats. And so I've been trying this thing of, I don't know, I'm trying to emulate this guy who I think is really good, which is Bernie Wrightson. He was an inker, and he was really phenomenal. And there's just this sense that you get from his stuff of a really strong sense of white area versus black area. And then oftentimes, it's almost like instead of thinking about things as only black ink, it's like he's doing white ink on inside of his black areas, and then black ink into his white areas. And so in this way he gets like a 3-tone value of like pure white, black with hatching, and then pure black. And he builds up his values really beautiful in that sense. So the thing about that is I like to start with that strong sense of like, can I do this entirely in black and white? So I'm going to set this layer. I'm going to turn off my previous layer. And I'm going to set this top layer to a different blend mode, which is going to be subtract, I think? We'll know when I fuck it up. And just to show you what that looks like, if I just fill in my flats with black now, the subtract layer mode transfer is going to remove that. And it's something where, like, I'm trying to, you know, as I've gotten more and more older and wiser about the arts, like, I think about this a lot. Like, how can I have, like, the fastest economy of stroke? And this sort of gigantic shape idea is the most economic way to get a lot of stuff done really fast. Yeah, the best.
He streams.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
He does big, he'll do like a big swatch of like black like that, and then he'll just he'll hit the edge just to give it that nice, like
yeah.
Things actually stroke.
Yeah, I saw some like Comic-Con demo of his. I showed it in class, and it just changed my life because he has, like, everyone's got these nice tools, these microns and these brushes, and he just takes his jug of ink and he's like, let's just pour it on there and smear it around with my hand. How do you get this on there as fast as possible? So having done that, I can now start bringing my blacks into my whites and my whites into my blacks. And for this, I'm going to create another layer. I can actually also, if I wanted to be really picky, I could turn on. Oh, another setting I'm using all the time now is auto lock inactive layers. So in your Grace Pencil layers, it's in the little arrow. And what's nice about this is it just makes it so that a lot of the editing tools are really nice. I'm going to try and make this so that nothing for my flats layer is outside of that initial sketch. So something like this. And this is traditionally what you would use a flat for, is like, it's very handy to, I mean, oftentimes you'll use a paint bucket for it, but it's very handy to have a very clean flat where it's exactly over the border of where you're going to use that. And we're going to use that today for clipping masks. This is not the way to do it. Always use the most efficient way. But this is pretty close, right? That's like kind of what you might expect to see. So if I turned off my other layer, there's our overall thing. Now what's nice about this is I can create a new layer on top of this, which is going to be my inks. And I'm going to set this, I'm going to start by just going to draw mode, and let's draw something. Why not, like that. So this is clearly on top, but I can click this button next to opacity, and it's going to be affected as a clipping mask. I think they call it something different. Clamp pixels. Every software and industry has a different fucking name for the same ideas. So the idea is that its opacity is determined by the layer below it. So my fills layer is going to determine this layer. So if I go into edit mode now, I'm just going to delete this stroke. And we're going to go into a more drawing-oriented sensibility. So now I'm going to get my blacks layer. And you can sort of see the benefits of this in that if I go like this, I can ink very fast and organically. And I don't have to worry that I'm drawing outside of there. Because it's it's not going to go outside of that fill layer. So from here what I like to do is I'm going to use my guides because the guides are really, really good. You'll notice that there's a circular guide, a radial guide, a parallel guide, and a grid guide. I'm going to start with the circular guide. And this is set by my 3D cursor, which now is displayed here because the guide is turned on. If I Control Shift, Alt.
It's a right.
Is it just right click?
Shift right click.
There it is, Shift right click. If I Shift right click, I can set this to be here or there. So I can think about how I want to have this wrap around the form. And I'm going to set this right here. So you can picture like a circle going like this. And now, turn on post-processing. So now I can ink in a way that's really pleasant and coming out of my flats into this area. And as somebody who has always been a messy artist, I'm just like left-handed. My first experiences were smearing my page as I write. And what's funny is I think if I had this set to be where I wasn't streaming, I would have more sensitivity here.
Left-handed is just to use the German page upside down and write that first one backwards to keep you from.
So next up, I want to circle into this cheek. And you guys might have experienced this a little bit through 3D rendering, but if you draw enough, you really start to have to study this. But shadows tend to be something where you have two kinds of shadows in like your basic art lesson, which is a core shadow, and that's something like here on this cheek, and that's something that shows how form is transitioning from the lights into the darks. And then you have cast shadows, and that's something where, you know, in 3D, the instant you get cast shadows, it's like, yay, what a great feature to ship. So cast shadows tend to have a harder edge, and this matters based on your light source, but that's generally the conventional wisdom is as a form turns away from the light, the core shadow is going to round and be soft. And assuming that you have a single light source, that shadow is going to be hard. So you can modify this by having a differently sized light source. So if I had a softbox, that would be different. And what's cool is I can, of course, go the opposite way with white. Like that. And like this circle template is so nice because you can think about big ideas of like, where would I round into this to like go into the nose? And switch to black. But you can see how this idea of big areas of shading is paying off, right? Like I got the big idea of it before I go into these little ideas. And of course, you can always turn this off temporarily. I'll just go back into like generalized rendering. I mean, I can't stress the importance of drawing enough if you want to do this kind of stuff. I'm pretty quick at this, but it's a lot of pain and suffering and slow renderings to have developed a certain shorthand for some of these ideas. Okay, I want this to go like that direction, around here, so there maybe? Off.
What were the other guide types? We had radial. And
Yeah, so there's radial. So I use circular here. Radial would be like something if you wanted to set it right there. What if I start by blacking out the nose here, but then turning on the guides, and with that radial guide, you could do something where it's all your strokes come off of this. I think, like, you know, it's one of those things where having knowledge of other artists is really good for this, because you can just go in and copy their style. So all these guys have a different inking style. I think Heinrich Clay is an artist who I enjoy for his absolute pure mess. I think like he's somebody I emulate a lot because he's a filthy slob like I am. And so if you look at his ink, a lot of times he's just going all over and eventually it builds up. But he's not using that sense of like a strong guide. And a lot of times he's doing something that almost has like a continuous contour vibe to it. Stuff like this. But somebody like Rick Leonardi. Rick Leonardi was a comic artist on like Spider-Man 2099 and a bunch of other stuff. Always, I wish there was a way to set Google search tools to always be large. It's probably a Google away. But so Rick Leonardi is a perfect. Oh God.
You can set it up to like large image
Go
results.
to. So you can see like Rick Leonardi is a great example of, first off, having this big idea, but then you can see an example of that radial technique where right here all his whites are going out from this central area, and then occasionally, like something like in his muscles, he'll use the grid mode. Rick Leonardi was not doing his comics in Blender, by the way.
Because he's got these cool tools, he does now, I'm sure. Only thing.
So parallel is one where you can set an angle. And get nice clean lines. I want this to be like -60. And you get some of those nice Cersei Lannister cheekbones in there.
So does your first stroke?
No, it's something where you like manually set it. There's probably a nicer way to do it, but I don't know how. Like it would be nice if you could just draw an angle.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe next week.
Does
Yeah, give it a week and they'll have it. What's that?
The 3D cursor can be like rotated and stuff like that.
I don't know if you have. I don't think they expose the rotation values. It supports rotation, but I don't think you can customize its rotation.
Oh, so that's one thing you can do though, is
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to.
let's go back to draw mode. One thing you can do is have your angle set to 0, and the thing that you would do in traditional art is don't rotate your ink, rotate your page to the comfort level of your hand. So
Traditional animator tables have rotating.
yeah. So let's say I wanted some straight lines here. I would just rotate it to feel like a straight line. And go off of that. Black. Which is kind of fun for cross-hatching.
Well, it's kind of like a paper doll. Like, you know, one of the ones that's animated like a puppet.
Oh yeah. To move. Or artifacts, puppets, like Archer.
something I used to do is create different layers with the strokes at different angles.
Yeah, and then you can just rotate it.
Erase this from layer to layer and eliminate or keep something between to get the different combinations.
And you can sort of see the idea here, right? Yeah, so if you wanted to do that, another thing you could do is create a new layer. The benefit of which is it's permanently only on this. So if I went in and drew some crosshatch here, because it's only the default layer, I can then just go into edit mode and move it around until I like it.
Is edit mode the only way to do rotations like that with grease pencil?
There's also sculpt mode, but like the benefit here is that it's temporarily its own layer.
So each of these layers, they belong to the same object, so you can
Yeah.
activate an object mode. Right?
Yeah, but the what I have it because it's set to only allow the current layer, I can jump in and out a little easier, and so in that way, like you can build up your strokes like that. Or, alternatively, create a new layer, set it to opacity, draw with the grid. I'm going to set this to 90 degrees. And because it's only affecting this one, I could also go to sculpt mode and using this brush make a total mess that nobody likes. Anyways, that's some of the stuff I've been playing with. Is my default grease pencil file. Again, should I save this? No.
Save it and upload it so we can get to it on.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Give it a really memorable naming convention, like derp.
Yes, yeah.
So just generally, like, things I would recommend on your default grease pencil file is if you are on a Windows Surface thing, or Windows Touch and 2-in-1 laptop is the technical term. It's 2-in-1 laptop. Set it to be post-processor settings, or active smooth on 1 for all of your separate brushes. And then on all of your separate brushes, change your curves to have this kind of fall off. And then again, I like having these as my default materials. I have a finished file, by the way. I don't know if you guys want to explore it.
We don't, but you can show them.
Exactly. So here's like the end of the chapter. And I don't know. This was just, can you explore grease pencil as like a purely illustration thing? And
Just a gradient in the background?
so this is 2 objects.
Are all those grease pencil objects?
Yes, this is all grease pencil. And it's all done from the front. I did several of these on separate layers. Some of these are kind of dumb in that I should have had this. Like these I should set to a new layer and set this layer to be opacity driven. So this is just like, yeah, nice. Nah. I can just have like 1 or 2 shadow passes. The sky one, this is also like an examination of different materials that you can use to change things. Buy my book. Our book. So the sky has a blur effect, and I think it also has a light effect. Oh yeah, I think that's it. It's just the material as a gradient. So the sky material is set to a fill with a gradient. And just a personal opinion, but I think the gradient system right now in Grease Pencil is awful. It's so weird. It makes no sense. There's no like visible sense of like, here's the top, here's the bottom. Yeah, it's this is all basically me typing in random numbers until it felt correct.
Oh wow. Is that, maybe it's relative to the object's origin?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, that's what I kept thinking. But like there was no sense of like a 0, a 1, and I set a 0.5 midpoint.
Yeah,
yeah, it looks like that.
There's no way to have it be like sort of UV based or camera based.
I don't think that's it. It looks unfinished.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a work in progress.
Can you use nodes on Grease Pencil?
Animation nodes, you can use nodes on anything now. Has anybody been following animation nodes? This is what I've been watching at the gym. And, I'll just get on the exercise bike, search Blender 2.8 and see what's up first. Oh, here's the newest, Blender 2.8. Live now. But animation nodes are going really, really well.
It's good to hear. I haven't checked in on it at all. They were taking a second look at doing the Everything Nodes project, and I think they're pushing that to 2.81.
Chris Preninger is doing lots of really cool animation nodes tutorials. It's just cool to see that this is our future. It's probably not going to happen in 2.8, but it will happen. And then yeah, like the last thing that's worth noting is on this, I just did like classic animation lazy perspective where each of these is technically a separate object.
Do the parallax shit.
And like a multi-plane camera.
Yeah, so I can say, oh, the character's this big. The shadow is just like drawn in manually.
Would that be easy to do, or like a shadow with?
So that's in theory one of the things they're looking for is at some point having Grease Pencil strokes that can cast a shadow as like a modifier. They have one that kind of works, but I found it easier to just draw it in manually. But at some point they want it so that it's a simple like this makes sense to us as basically an alpha card, right? So in theory, we should have a light here and be able to just cast it backwards. And that's the future, is like actually having like a 2D card in a 3D place, and we have a 3D shadow cast off of it. But they don't have it yet.
As neat as it sounds, I imagine it would kind of highlight how flat the character actually is, though.
I mean, it's, it's,
really
to some extent, like 2D animation is by default a stylized arena, an endeavor. And then the character here, I've got like some modifiers on it.
How's the highlight on the right where the shadow's cast into the right?
I have no idea.
It's a special shadow.
This is my current desktop background. But you guys saw some of this. And this was, oh yeah, the other thing that I've been using a lot. Most of this character was inked using a certain newer tool, or a more developed tool, which is the curve and the arc tool. I love this. I think that's the other thing I have modified on my default, is I now have thickness profile turned on by default. And additionally, again, dealing with my crazy pen problem, I have the thickness to be not quite at 1,000, like 100%, just because I was getting weird stuff. But so if I pull out this, I use the arc for all things now. I don't ever use, or I use the curve. What is the technical term? Curve, arc, and line. I don't use the arc tool or the line tool. Why? Because look, this is a line. Now what's great is I can just extrude right off of this. I'm hitting the E key to extrude. And you can use this like the line tool. However, I can also grab this little widget and pull it out. If I hit F, I can modify the stroke size right off the bat. And I can just keep extruding off of this. Why don't I use the arc tool? Because in the same way that I can just not use the little Beziers to get a straight line, I can hit C to switch between curve and arc. So right now it's on curve. And if I hit C, it'll switch to be just an arc. So sometimes I don't want the extra curve.
That's really exciting. 'Cause back when I used to use Flash, that was my favorite thing
It's
about
so
it,
nice.
is that you could just grab the edge and kind of pull to get your curve. And I don't think I've seen another program be able to do that.
MS Paint was able to do that. It had a curve tool.
No, I mean like with proper vectors though. Like,
Yeah.
we can draw a straight line and then bend it into a nice smooth arc. So that's really exciting.
Yeah,
You could
it's
do that, but
it's suddenly just
not-
overnight very robust.
Not MS Paint, Paint.net.
No, MS Paint.
What?
Yeah, you could
Sometimes,
click, and then you could move it, but you couldn't see the physical handles.
so I use some combination of extrude and then sometimes this. The other thing that I do occasionally is a lot of times what I'm doing with this is you'll notice that if I am extruding, I get this continuing edge, and that's nice because the opposite is this, where I have a curve and it's going from thin to thick to thin, and then I end it, and then I might want to continue off of that, and I have this problem where it starts off as thin to thin. So sometimes what I do is I'll use an alternate curve profile that is more pure thin to thick, and then my sensibility is that I'll manually choose where that thin start is and the thick start. It's really nice. All right, let's take a break, and then when we get back, who wants to talk? Who's got stuff? Everybody else got stuff too. Sick of talking. Cool. I think I'm gonna stop screen sharing now. Yeah. Take her away.
I'm more because trying to learn reading, designing,
Are you done with OBS, Oscar?
It knows this is the scale, but it doesn't. There's like, in 3 printers, actually, they don't have a calibration.
Are you done with OBS?
Yeah. No, leave that up. It's still streaming.
And then
Just ignore it.
not hold that calibration.
Are we actually like streaming to YouTube or something?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. And there's me.
So don't pick your nose.
Too late.
Whose drive is this?
That's mine.
Oh. That's alright.
Yeah, I was when I was buying a printer, I looked at what quality is doing even better than they got. I didn't think he better mind, but yeah. And then I was like, oh man, that would be great. But you're paying extra for that. Like he was more of a conversation here guy, and I was like, I don't want to spend the time fixing the printer, I just want to print. So I got something similar to fix it. We got something called a roll swap. like a little company, you know, like a little car has it's a bigger machine with a bigger bed. I've got mini, which is a smaller print bed.
So you mainly been working with VR stuff?
Yeah, it is all VR. It's not super. So what we're doing is we're at a point now where
So the new figures.
your teacher we're focusing on performance.
Yes. So
So
yeah,
we're creating
so the
LEDs
is really
with
cool.
that level detail
And
for all of our assets. And
adding I didn't know anything.
so I open up like a Suco in Blender, and I have to create 3 different levels of detail. So the level 0 is the mesh as it is. The level 1 is like a 40% reduction, and then the lowest level of detail is like 50 triangles. So it's kind of simple. I'm just like dissolving edges and collapsing edges, and kind of finagling stuff. And it's kind of chilling. I usually do that every once in a while, but right now I'm mostly focusing on performance. So level details was kind of good. Yeah, especially now that people are like they have that like mobile VR headsets.
The Cruiser could become as a kit more pre-assembled.
Because right now we focus primarily on the Vive and the Red and PSVR, which have a little bit more oomph than like the Samsung, you know, little.
Does VR work on For sure. Well, I mean,
Yeah, the whole Steam VR thing, right? Steam sure was real links.
Yeah,
Right.
they've actually done a, like, now they make like a wine, you know what wine is? Yeah. They made a version of it, like they made an enhanced version of it for like.
That's a perfectly good example. Most of them have
The last time I asked you a question, you told me about the zip file or whatever. Anyway, in the Linux based, well, the Ubuntu setting up
like if you have like
what they call snaps.
0.8
And it actually sets it up into the menu, like built in. Anyway, I was gonna give that to you. Just now is doing this command. And that sets it up with the Blender icons there, so you can pull it out.
You actually see.
Yeah, I just mainly just don't.
Okay, well, just in case you want to look into it. I mean, it's real easy for updating because you can uninstall it and then reinstall the new snap.
Then there's a reason you keep the seed layer heights on this one.
So the nozzle doesn't necessarily define the layer height.
Correct. But it can.
I spend a lot of wasted time trying to get this stuff. Pure program, code with code.
It's a really big, huge nozzle. It's hard for it to do a sleeve move.
You more prone to like sticking and filtering and forget if you have a really thick nozzle and you're trying to print a really thin line.
Sometimes, even with a fine print head, I get lots of streaky stuff. That was using an experiment called trees to support things like, these are printing layers on top of things that already exist. The printer software. Oh, no?
Are these the same character?
No, this is like a rat guy with a bow, but he didn't quite turn out right. I was trying experiments like how you can print it, how you can use doing on mesh mixers. I was trying out mesh mixers in the open source AutoCAD program that can edit meshes. Not as easy, but you can edit meshes, but it can also clean if it prints in some ways. So you can print in different angles and you can design different supports of the new print.
Mesh mixer. We're just trying it into
I tried it, Blender was my first choice. I looked around, one of the things, Blender is an open source program, it's super good because if someone discontinues it, you can still play around with it. At the time I got into this, AutoCAD just had gotten rid of like 1, 2, 3, something.
279s are.
Yeah, what I'm going to show today isn't working in 2.8 yet. Baking is broken.
Baking?
Yeah, I don't know.
Sort of like texture map baking or AO or like animation?
Normal map baking, as far as I'm aware, or last I checked anyway. doesn't work, and then I checked last night, the dynamic paint baking isn't working either. The normal map one tries, but what you get as a result is just this garbage, and it confused me for a minute. I'm like, why does my normal map look strange? And then it's just because it doesn't work in 2.8 yet. Although that was a couple of weeks ago when I checked, so they might have fixed it already.
That's the thing. It's like the nice thing about the old Blender internal is you could make out like normals like super quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people use Substance Painter anyway, so to do all their baking, so it's I think a low priority for them to fix at the moment. And then the dynamic paint, I think just the baking system in general, because they gutted the Blender internal code, is just broken. And Eevee doesn't bake yet, so.
I guess you guys really see like a baking search engine?
Oh yeah, probably. I don't know if it'll ever do that, but supposedly it was going to take on everything that internal could do before. So.
Right, but it sounds like Workbench is mostly kind of plugs some of that way back here.
That's true. Workbench, I don't think really counts as a proper engine though. It's just OpenGL stuff, and it like when you render, it just is doing a screen grab of what you got.
What that does, but it also draws the viewport, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, so does Eevee. I think
that's not.
I think Workbench wasn't really supposed to exist initially, and then they realized that they needed to split it from Eevee. I think they're both using the same stuff under the hood. It's just like the simplified. I could be wrong about that though. I've been following the development for so long. Now I'm confused as to what's what. They've renamed Workbench so many times.
Good. How have you been?
I've been doing well.
How's the quarter going?
Pretty good. I'm still trying to find a slot to get the LW Tech Blender Club going again, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen this quarter because this classroom's booked, and the only other classroom I don't have a key for. I could still maybe make it work, but I've had so much on my plate. I'm trying to finish this project and actually like get through my classes and all that kind of stuff at the same time. I think we'll be able to get it up and running again. Maybe this next quarter, maybe later this quarter. How about you? You've been working on any projects that you've been excited about?
Just been doing a lot of modeling.
Yeah, cool.
Made some nice tractor recently, and messed around with the submarine underwater scene and was playing with the buoys a little bit.
Nice.
Barely understand that stuff, hardly.
The Blake particles?
Yeah.
Yeah, those can be really cool.
But yeah, that was fun. It's like playing with their brain and stuff. That's really cool. You can like.
I told my dad about boys, and he was making fun of me for. You mean birds? Boys. They're boys. They fly. Because I think initially they were kind of designed around that because they flock together and they avoid each other, which is what's so cool about voids. Whereas normal particles don't really calculate each other, so they'll just kind of click through each other and all that. But with voids, you can do more logical kind of stuff. Flocking birds, or there's a game called Devil Daggers, which is a really fantastic game. And the main enemy are the skulls that swarm you, and they're all done with voids. Some people just
You're saying how good you are right now.
What?
You're saying how good you are.
Oh, in Devil Daggers?
Yeah, because it usually lasts long, but those kind of go away. You get some really crazy.
Yeah,
I'm bad.
I'm 40 global. Position 40 global.
Whoa.
Yeah, almost 800 seconds.
Oh, that's insane. Yeah. I can make it a minute or two if I'm really good at this.
Yeah, I put way too much time into that game. It's such a gorgeous game.
I love drawing attention to like a lot of kind of lo-fi aesthetic as far as imprecise vertex.
Yep, the little pixel or polygon jitter. I think what's really fantastic about that game is the effort in places that, like, where most people wouldn't have put it, like the little secrets that are in the startup area. Like,
I never even noticed that.
Oh yeah, you can't find them unless you really know that they're there. But there's two. One you have to jump off of an edge rather than grabbing the dagger to start the game. You jump off the edge and you can land on a platform, and if you jump back and forth just right, you find this monolith that shows Sorath's logo, and it plays one of the only soundtrack music in the game. And there's music for the game. There's like 5 tracks in the game, but they're all in these secret areas. They're not in the actual game.
Does it have a soundtrack?
What's that?
Does the game have a soundtrack?
Well, not during gameplay.
No, I mean
though,
like
but
one you can buy.
you can just pull it out of the game files.
Yeah, I was kind of kidding, because...
Yeah, right. Sell you the OST, but then you can't even hear it. So I'm ready to go if you guys want to kind of bring it back.
I played a lot. Oh,
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Alright, yes, sir. Ready to discuss.
Dun dun dun. Alrighty guys, so I have a couple things to show off. Some of it you might have seen before, depending on if you were here one of the days that I was showing off the model before, but it's been updated, so for all of you it'll be something a little fresh. This is a game project that I've been working on since June? Something like that. Around that time, and this was a project that me and my brother were working on, and we actually got to show it off at PAX, this most recent PAX. We have a little ways to go. We're hoping to ship by March. We'll see if that goes. But we're both really busy now. But yeah, this is Rotund, a well-rounded gentleman. And it's a little video game project where you collect cake and become really fat. You are trying to become a well-rounded gentleman so that the bouncer will let you into the fancy club. So this is the main character that I've been working on like crazy because I want him to be a portfolio piece as well as just like looking pretty cool. And let me turn on render only. So recently I've been updating the texture on this guy. He's got a little ways to go, but now he's got like little subtle reds and the stripes on the pants and that kind of thing. So he can. This mouse is really slow. Okay. So the main challenge with this character is that as he eats cake, he gets bigger. So if we pull in the slider here, until he's perfectly round, and then he can roll away into the fancy club. Later on, I'll have some gameplay that you guys can check out, but I don't think that's going to be today.
So are you animating a cast model?
I was hoping to do it with shape keys initially, but because he's so dramatically different in this fully round state versus the skinny one, these are each actually individual models. So, no, I've turned off the selectability. There we go. So he's quite low poly. I think altogether they're like 12,000 triangles for all 4 combined. So it's pretty light because it's intended to be for mobile, and then all the textures fit on. Come on, mouse. There we go. All the textures fit on one sheet. So he's got all the pants, all the jackets, all the heads, hands, hat, ties, shirt, blah blah blah, and the shoes. So I've been chipping away at this texture for a while. He ended up on the back burner because I just really burned myself out working on it. What's up?
So do they not reuse the texture? Do you have multiple versions of the texture for each model?
Parts get reused, so the monocle here gets reused every time.
Sure.
And the buttons get reused. But things like the tie, because of the way he expands, the tie changed shape. Primarily the shadow data was the part that got weird. So
the AO?
Yeah, the baked AO wasn't going to line up between them, so I just went for the approach of actually unwrapping them differently. Also the shape, particularly on the big one, it's actually slightly higher poly count to get this kind of curve slightly going here. It's really subtle, and I probably, if I had...
How fast is it going to be rolling? Also a question.
He rolls...
Slowly?
Well, so he rolls 1-to-1 with how far you're pushing the thumbstick, so you could have him roll really slowly. So, I forgot to bring a game controller today, but next time I'll bring in a demo that you can try out. But for the rig, he's fully rigged and ready to go. It is all sharing one rig, which is pretty cool. So
Sorry, I have a controller right here.
oh, sweet. Cool. Then after, if we take another break, I can set it up. It's not ready to go just yet. But,
I'm just gonna put it here.
all right. Well, awesome. Thank you. So as he turns his head around, the monocle chain actually kind of bends around. So because it's actually on an IK, so as he looks around here, and what's really neat about this is that it's going to look a little bit weird because his legs are so spread out here, but because this is all actually in a single rig here, I can pull up my custom properties and change how much he weighs right here, and it's all one piece. So skinny fat, and I can repose this maybe. It looks really weird if I get them too out of place because the fat one can't bend that far, but if we take a look again here, change the weight back up, it's all one piece, which is really fantastic because I have to reanimate him now because we had temporary animations and now he needs to have like actually time put into them to look good. But with these animations, I can get one walk cycle going and then increase the size and make the appropriate tweaks rather than having to make an entire new walk cycle. Because the main goal for this character was that consistency between each of these states. So, you know, we got the mustache grows a little bit with each state, curls a little bit more.
Is that mustache control, or is that just like line?
The mustache.
Is that?
There's one scene where he talks. Except I realized that we're probably going to be seeing him from the back of the head, so I just realized that this is totally like unnecessary. But like the hat can come off, and you can move here. You can. Wow, this mouse keeps sticking. Sorry about that. But yeah, he's got full control here, and it's really subtle. But I've finally got some coloration in the hands, and I wanted it to be. Really lighthearted and kind of cutesy with bright color palettes, and I did my very best to avoid any really dark shadows. So my ambient occlusion, rather than being blended in as like a multiply layer, I actually use it to shift the hue. So we can see in his jacket here, rather than it becoming black as it gets into the shadow area, it turns to this like deeper purple, and that's consistent throughout. So if we look under his if we look under his shoulder here, we never get to a black, we get to kind of a deeper area there. And this was a trick I was learning recently, because I'm not a 2D artist, but I've been looking at 2D painting and digital painting kind of stuff, and this is a technique they say a lot, is like stay away from pure black, at least if you want it to have this kind of painterly look. So I've been really enjoying that, and I'm quite happy with how this turned out. We've got this spine control rigged up here. So if we go to control period, will shift you to individual origins as a pivot, which is really great for things that are in this parented chain here. So I can grab all three of these and we can twist the spine kind of incrementally. And then the buttons on his chest are actually separate bones that are pinning to the vertices that are transforming underneath, so that they stay a consistent shape as he bends up and down.
Now, have you been doing the texture painting in Blender?
I have, and that's primarily because I wanted to do it all in 3D, and parts of it I toggle back into Photoshop to do it there, and that's where I combine everything, because of all the things that Blender's painting tools can do, erasing is not easy. So I've just been doing that in Photoshop, but we can rock his hips back and forth. So yeah, last time you guys saw this, he did not have the stripes on his pants, and that was the main reason I wanted to show you guys today, because I want to show you how I actually achieved the stripes. Oh wait, I want to show this awesome foot roll he can do. Where'd the custom properties go? The UI's too big, I don't know where my stuff went. There it is. So foot roll can roll up on the foot, or you can roll back on the heel. And this is really great for when you do walk cycles, because we do this with our feet when we go through walk cycles. So if your rig doesn't have this, you're going to have a pretty hard time animating that.
Well, it could be a waddle cycle.
Yeah, a waddle cycle. Yeah, actually, to be honest, when he gets up to the third stage here, or this one, he kind of does just waddle. you can see here because of his size, it doesn't like look quite right there. So the plan is to just kind of go back through and make these subtle adjustments. But he's got these shoulder controls and things like that. And you can
Yeah, it's easier to clean up the animation than to.
yeah, then have to reanimate. Because primarily what I'm concerned with is the consistency of the timing. I don't want, because he kind of moves to the music of the game, and I want to make sure that I got that timing just right. So, yeah, this guy's been labor of love, a lot of fun to put together. But I want to talk about how I did the stripes on the pants. So, because that's a technique that you guys can use for a lot of different things on your own, whether you're doing pants or like anything else. Because my problem with it was he's so low poly. If we take a look here, I mean there have been much lower poly models in the past, but he's quite low poly here, and even on the larger, rounder sizes. And so particularly up here in the waist, we end up with these weird issues where we end up with these angular protrusions of the polygons, and trying to hand paint this is kind of a mess because it's doing projections when you paint on there. And it might look right from one camera angle, and then as soon as you rotate the camera, it's like, it looks jaggedy and nasty. I mean, we already see a little bit of that happening here. But to try to paint these lines and keep this consistent thickness of each of the stripes, and also just kind of preview the position, the overall look of those, was going to be a giant pain in the butt. So instead of trying to hand paint those, I used a cool tool that's built into Blender called Dynamic Paint. And I want to talk about that a little bit for you guys now. So Dynamic Paint, I found a cool tutorial, and I'll post that on the Facebook group in case anybody wants to basically do what I'm about to do here. So Dynamic Paint has a handful of really cool modes. What it lets you do is have two meshes, and where they collide, one colors the other. So I'm going to scale this guy up, and it'll be my canvas. Let me just subdivide that a whole bunch. And we want to unwrap and we'll do a smiley face as our canvas. So if we do it like this.
You mean as your brush?
As our brush, yes, sorry. Something like that, and then a cube. Toggling between Blender 2.8 and Blender 2.9 is weird. So right now you have to do this in Blender 2.9. Sorry, yeah, 2.79. 2.79.
You guys aren't using 2.9?
Yeah, guys, jump into the future a couple years, and then you can follow along. Sorry, you have to do this in 2.79 for now because the baking is broken in 2.8. But that, I'm sure, will come back pretty soon.
Well, I'd already have come back again.
I tried this last night and it wasn't working, so not just yet. In 2.8, yeah. So, all right. So we've got a canvas, we've got a brush, and where you find the Dynamic Paint options are over here. So let's pull this open. I'm going to turn off my...
You might want to turn the DPI up.
Oh yeah, sorry guys. Settings, interface. There we go. Okay. So it's actually quite simple to set this up. There are a couple of sources that you're painting it to. So you could paint to weights, you could paint to vertex data, or you could paint to an image texture. So I'm going to show you a little bit of both. In my case, I needed it to paint to an image texture because eventually I was painting that onto my texture. So for this one, make sure that your canvas is UV unwrapped because it's going to need UVs if it's going to paint. And then come over to your physics tab over here, and it's in the same area where you would have soft body simulation, fluid simulation, all that. Just right over here, Dynamic Paint. Click on that one. And for the canvas, make sure we're on canvas. And we need to add a new canvas right here. So we are setting up how it's going to receive the paint. So let's do this as a image texture. And we'll do
Surface is going to be just fine. Format, this is the important one. Are we doing this as vertex data, or are we painting to an image sequence? Obviously, image sequences are going to get quite large, so be prepared for that. But we'll do an image sequence. Resolution for those, we'll do just 512, 512 by 512. That should be fine. Surface type, paint. There's one more. Paint output, yeah. Don't when you're using the image sequence, you have to make sure that you actually are sending that data somewhere. So let's put this in just my SSD here. And dynamic paint, we'll do another folder. New folder. We'll save it in new folder. Perfect. Okay, so we've picked our location, our image type, paint maps. And that should be just fine. Scaled up the UI, so I'm trying to find where my next little option is. Okay, so I think we're good on that one. So the other thing is we want to actually animate our brush and actually turn on our brush. So again, in the Physics tab, this time with our brush selected, grab the Dynamic Paint button again, and this time instead of canvas we're going to go to brush, add brush, and absolute alpha, use object material. So these options would change up your colors. By default it gives it this blue, and that's going to be just fine for now. Paint source is going to be the mesh volume. So in my experience, if your mesh has holes in it, this is not going to be less consistent, so try to have only a perfectly manifold object when you're doing this. And I know I'm missing a checkbox somewhere, but we're going to try anyway. So if we go back over here, I'm going to insert a keyframe of the brush right where it is, move a little bit ahead, bring it down so that it clips through, and cut. So now the volume of this one is penetrating the other, and we'll insert a keyframe there. Kind of come forward a little bit, bring it back up, come over here. Insert a keyframe there. I mean, you could animate this however you want. This would be really great if you were doing a character that needed to like paint a canvas. Because having a character drawing something in a scene is otherwise really difficult, because you'd have to like manually mask out everything and like slowly update frame by frame. And this way you can just do it dynamically with dynamic paint. So that looks pretty good to me. So we've got this sequence. We run to frame 56 here. So we'll go back to our, let me save this really quick in case we crash. Untitled.blend, perfect. So back to the canvas, let's make sure that we're set up to, there it is. Okay, start frame, 1, end frame, we'll just do 56. And sub-steps, there we go, that was the one I was missing before. Sub-steps, I'm going to set this to 1. The tutorial I was watching said to do this, and I don't know why, but we're going to do it, because that's what
that is.
Oh,
sub-step is a step in between the frames.
Oh, there we
So
go.
it basically, having one sub-step means that in between the frames is going to pretend like there's another frame.
Awesome.
So like when you're simulating water and stuff, if you like throw a ball at the puddle, and the ball is here on frame 1 and here on frame 2, it'll make it look like 2 separate balls splashed, and if you add subframes, it'll imagine that ball splashed in water.
Awesome, there we go. Okay, so we're all set up. Make sure we set that to the UV map, although I imagine it would figure that out on its own. And then this magic button here, Bake Image Sequence. And this is the thing that doesn't work in 2.8 yet. So Bake Image Sequence, we got our progress up here. It's a relatively quick piece. Boop. And it actually scrubbed through time, so it ends up with our awesome little face here at the end. And if we open up our new folder here, we can actually see our frames of dynamic paint, which is pretty cool. We can see that it actually painted this whole image sequence. It's stamped down a second time, and it kind of streaked across. So then the last piece would be to preview this thing in the viewport. So this is a relatively easy thing to do. I'm going to split off here and get a node editor. I can remember how to do it in old Blender. And then for this one, I'm just going to set up a custom material that is, just to make it easy, we're going to use, we're in Blender Render. We want to be in Cycles. Okay, new material, going to change this to emission. For those of you that don't know, emission is a really nice material because normally it emits light, but if you leave it at this strength of 1, it doesn't receive any light, so it won't be like covered in shadows and stuff when you go to render. This is really great for previewing textures and that kind of stuff. In fact, the Node Wrangler plugin uses one of these when you're doing previews. And then we will add a image texture.
It's also nice for like if you want to do some tune stuff.
Yeah, cartoon kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely. There's just no shading on it at all. It's an unlit texture. So then we can grab all of these frames.
You can press A.
There we go. Going to grab all these frames, and Dynamic Paint numbered them, so Blender should be able to understand that and sequence them appropriately. I learned this last night, actually, that you can import an image sequence into your image node. So when we open the image there, it changes the node a little bit to show the number of frames, 56. That's how many we baked, so that's good. And then we want this auto refresh option here so that it actually updates. And Blender's smart enough to know that we should update, as the timeline scrubs, we should update this. So we'll just change our viewport to actually show the material. And it's pink right now because the first couple frames, we're on frame 0, and as soon as we move into a frame that got something, it stays pink. Hold on. Cycles render.
Try going into render view to see if it.
Okay, well, I don't know why the material preview mode wasn't working, but we'll suffice with this. So as it comes down, it stamps, boop, and it painted that spot, and it comes down again, stamps there, and as it drags across, it stamps over and over and over again, dynamically painting that texture, which is really cool for a lot of things, and you could use this for blending materials in real time, or having a character paint a canvas, and wherever their brush touches the canvas, it leaves behind paint. You could use this to paint weights on things. They had another really cool one.
If you keyframe the alpha to make it more transparent as you went along, would that also?
Yeah, you could use it as an alpha channel if you set the paint instead of.
If you turn down the opacity of the
So
brush.
in other words, if it was opaque at one end of the stroke, and then so many frames later,
Oh.
transparent.
Yeah, it would.
Does it make that too?
Yeah, it would do that.
Okay, yeah, Joey's saying yes, and I think he knows more about this than I do. So,
I mainly use it just for particles. I mainly use it just to make like rain or snow.
Cool. And then there's one other cool, well, there's plenty of cool uses for this. I'm going to do another one here. I'm going to turn this into a, come on mouse, did it? There we go. I'm going to turn this new object here into a brush again. And I'm not going to worry about the color or any of that this time. And for the canvas, so we just saw what we can do with an image sequence, but instead of that, let's do, back to vertex data, surface type, we can change this, instead of receiving paint, there's this kind of fun one here. I don't know if there's a practical purpose for this, but this one's fun, is waves.
Waves would be useful if you're like trying to simulate somebody throwing something in water.
There we go. So as we can see here, as long as we are playing the animation, whenever this touches it, oh, it's still receiving the data from the other brush. Actually, that's kind of cool all on its own. Not the intended result, but the dynamic paint is actually real-time messing around with this. So you can do some really cool things with this. And it's one of those features that like nobody talks about because it's not modeling. But yeah, but it's so cool. Yeah, but it's so cool. So I'm gonna I'll post the tutorial that I found on YouTube that taught me everything that I just showed you. If you guys want to learn how to do that in like slower pace, but it's really cool stuff. And there's I struggled to find a use for this. I knew about it for a long time. And I finally got to use it on the stripes for the pants of the gentleman guy. So what I did was, rather than trying to do brush strokes for every single one of those and awkwardly rotating the camera, I actually modeled these 3D pipes around the pants, and this let me quickly prototype the size, and I would see, okay, yeah, this is, these are nicely spaced and all that, and I don't have to account for the skewing that's happening on the texture sheet or anything like that, because these pipes are just happening to be exactly the right shape that I want. I bake it, it comes out as a texture for where the pipes collided with it, and then I just blended it into this layer here. I forgot to bring the Photoshop file with me, but believe me, I did this. And so we can see there's the result of the pipes being baked in with dynamic paint. Yeah, it would be a giant pain to paint this by hand, especially in 2D here, where we would have to account for this skewing that's happening. Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is terrible, so I did it in dynamic paint, and I think it turned out really well. It took me maybe as long to do it this way as the other way might have taken, but the nice way about this was that I had a really early preview of what it was going to look like, and then it just took a couple of tweaks to get it exactly the way I wanted. So
it's another tool to put in the toolkit, don't forget.
Yeah. Woo.
I usually forget those things.
So there we go. This is
I have a question.
the gentleman. Yeah.
When you were doing the earlier smiley face dipping down into the thing, you were saying, oh, make sure it's manifold. How do you know it's manifold? Like, I know some 3D print tricks to show you how to test these secret objects in manifold. How do you know if it's manifold?
Primarily, I just meant make sure there's no giant gaping hole in it.
By manifold, you actually mean watertight, because there's...
Yeah, sorry. Manifold and watertight.
They're not actually interchangeable.
I use a tool, personally, I use a tool called Meshlint, which is a free plugin for Blender. It does not come stock. You have to go grab it off of, I don't know if it's GitHub or something, but it's super lightweight. And what it does is it gives you a button that, it doesn't really add anything, it just organizes it into a nice menu. And you just click it, and it's like, are there problems in my mesh? Go! And it says, there's 10 n-gons. There they are. There's non-manifold geometry. There are the edges that are a problem. You've got interior faces. There they are. And it's a really nice tool to have, because you could check through those things manually, but this little plugin just puts it in a nice column. So that's what I typically do. And Joey's right. I actually meant just watertight. Although I imagine interior faces would cause equal problems, because it's calculating the volume, and if it's got a giant hole in it, you'll end up with weird issues.
So what is the difference between manifold and watertight then?
Manifold, if there's something like this, if there's a face like this, it won't like it.
Okay.
So,
it's not manifold.
Yeah, so here...
Plane is technically manifold, but it's not watertight.
So, the classic non-manifold geometry is this. Where terrible. So this, we're trying to use both sides of this polygon here, and it's like joining in there. This is terrible.
So it would be fine if it's like there are cases where that would be fine.
Yeah, if you were using this as like the tail of an arrow or something where you didn't care and you're going to use the alpha cards on it or whatever, then it's not a big deal. But this kind of polygon here, especially when we come into doing this kind of thing, ew, terrible.
There's actually a way to find non-manifold faces just built in. It's Control-Alt-Shift-M.
Control-Alt-Shift-M?
Yeah.
There we go. Select non-manifold.
You can also use the spacebar key. I know that because I use that sometimes. I don't know why.
So yeah, there we go.
Thank you,
Check the box and you can eliminate different types of non-manifold.
Yeah, awesome. So there we go. That's how I use dynamic paint to my advantage, and made a fun little character's pants. Woo. So yeah, any questions before I close all these?
In the poster, he would explode if he got the cake.
Yeah, he would. Which I realized like after I painted it, but it's like kind of not representative otherwise. If you guys, if nobody else has something to show, I could, because Joey actually has a controller, I could pull up the demo that we showed. It does not have the most recent texture, and the weight painting on the game character is broken. I have since fixed those things, but this build does not have those. So this is all the models in this are done in Blender, but the game is actually done in Unity. So there he is. Ignore the buttons that are drifting away from him slowly. All these things that you're seeing are problems that have been fixed since then. But you can see he didn't have the stripes on the pants in this version. Also his skin is like strangely pale and things like that. So your goal is to get into the fancy club. But the bouncer won't let you in because only a well-rounded gentleman is allowed in the club.
You're gonna have like
Yeah. We have the music in the background. Is my friend Ethan put that together for us, and it actually scales with the amount of cake that you've got. I'm stuck. The controls down.
There's a button on it that changes what you put. It does like accent put versus.
That's weird. It just stopped working. Well, arrow keys are working. So then once you have all the cake, you can roll around. Yeah, that's weird. Let's try switching. Actually, there we go. It's working now. I think when I touched the volume controller back here, it screwed up. But yeah, this is all good fun. Bunch of silliness. And then you can go into the fancy club. So it's a puzzle game because you're trying to get the cake in the right order. If you get the cake too early, you try to climb these stairs. Oh no! Too much cake. Again, ignore the horrible weight painting that's happening there. That's all been fixed. We were in a rush to get the demo playable by PAX, so. The bouncer's just watching you the whole time. It's like... Tried to make the bouncer look like a bowling pin. It's like once you're a big bowling ball, you can get him out of the way. We have this treadmill. You can tell it's a treadmill because it says treadmill on it. And eventually there's going to be animations for him running on that, and that's how you lose weight. And so the puzzles will be like gaining and losing weight over and over again. I think this is my favorite part of the game, just doing this. Don't even beat the levels, just do this. Say that again?
You're gonna have to polish up just to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're missing shadows right now, but yeah. So then there's like this cake mix stuff here. You can push it around. Boop. 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 It opens up buttons and doors. And then one of my favorites here, we can make our own cake, because on this level there's only 2 pieces of cake. But if we grab this one, we can bump this off the edge. And blink and you'll miss it, but here's this little animation of the cake mix. Boop. Anyway, that's, oh yeah, you can't quit, you have to Alt F4. In this build, no. Later there will be puzzle elements where that is the case, where you have, the puzzles will be like a slingshot where you go higher if you weigh more, and so you have to get the right amount, then load yourself into the slingshot, and then maybe size back down afterwards, do some puzzle elements, size back up, size back down, size back up, and then you can finally leave. For now, we're missing a lot of those puzzle elements, so the level designs are not that interesting. But yeah, that's the demo we brought to PAX. It's a bit old at this point, and we've fixed a handful of things since then, but both of us got kind of burnt out working on it, so we took a break. But we're ramping up on it again. The texture that you saw today, I've been finishing up this week, and I mean, like even last night, I was still painting away at it, so it's a work in progress. But yeah, that's Rotund, a well-rounded gentleman. And thank you, Joey, for letting me borrow the controller.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that's the first building, second building. Wait, I have something I can show.
Yay!
Actually, I think I showed about.
Oh.
Did you guys see? Did I show you my Mobius strip thing?
I don't think you showed us the strict thing.
Give me 1 second.
I think you should make a suction noise when we get to it.
You should be able to knock the bouncer away, right?
I want to have it because like the door opens up anyway, so that players know that they can go in. But kind of a stretch goal is to add in little interactions like that, and I want it to be that if you bump into him, he knocks over as a bowling pin. Like, oh wow, you're such a gentleman. What about the duck hunt? Can you shoot the duck hunt? Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to get Duck Hunt working on an HD TV because I found some mods that the problem is that the light gun can't see light from an HD TV. It's got a filter in it, so it can only see the, I don't know if it's the frequency or the brightness or what of the light from CRT. But somebody has made a modded gun that works for that for HD TVs. But then the problem is that the software is set up so that it's expecting there to be no input delay at all, and HD TVs have the video buffer, so it doesn't work. It's always like half a second behind or something like that. So somebody wrote a custom version of the game where you can adjust the input delay, which is awesome. But to get a console that can load that custom version of the software and use the updated gun, it's almost non-existent. And I was looking into it, and I found a way to do it for like $400. I'm like, Duck Hunt is not worth $400. I've played Duck Hunt before. It's not worth this.
Yeah, you can, like, if you really want to go over the top, you can have multiple guys that, like, one of them lets you go. And if you're, like, super skinny, like, you know, they let you go based on how.
Yeah.
Multiple ones, but if you're, like, if you don't, but you can, like, roll into them and get knocked over.
Yeah. It'd be kind of fun. Maybe just have an extra level that's like a bonus level and you just knock over. I was thinking of like having like skee ball or something like that. And you just roll the jump. Okay, we're another stretch goal is we're hoping like on every level you would win like these fancy tokens or maybe the coasters from the club or something like that. And then you can cash it in and like, swap out your hat and like college seats and such like that. Because the goal is to ship the game for free and then sell level packs, and then I mean, because the levels are super easy to make. I can make a level in 20 minutes, and like including playtesting. Because I wrote some custom tools to do a couple. They're really not impressive tools, but they just make the snapping work better in Unity's UI, and the cubes that alternate color between gray and dark gray. I wrote a script that it can tell where it is, and then it automatically flips the color depending on that. So without having to do any kind of wacky editing, just drag the cube into place, it figures out where to snap to and what color it should be. And it's super nice, which was a good thing because we needed that when we were adding levels for our patch build. I think all the levels in like a day. Because we spent so long prototyping, you're like, wait, we don't have playable levels yet.
And now for a fun, dumb file I worked
Wait,
on.
at the moment, well, we're still doing some other elements, so.
No, I meant you have the technology to make packs that you can load into the game.
Not as of yet. We are looking into how the Android store loads those and how the iOS store can load those.
This is 2.8.
Because you want to I don't know if because I don't want to do it if they're loaded on already and then you can have to unlock them because that can be but also I would want to ship more eventually.
All right, so I had a very happy New Year's Eve because I played Dungeons and Dragons again for the first time in like 2 or 3 years. I used to be like, only thing I ever did with my life. Total shiftless layabout. So it was nice to return to that. And a friend ran the campaign, but then we were like, man, like this is pretty good. And like then we tried a campaign at my house, and it was really like a test drive to see if my children could behave or, you know, pleasantly be babysat by the television. And so the idea for this was like some sort of campaign referential to Labyrinth. And so it had like very flamboyant Goblin King-esque guy with a giant codpiece. And the idea was like you get sucked into this maze that has no end. It's a Mobius strip maze. How do you defeat a Mobius strip maze? And so it was a really fun file to. Yeah. So
Did the players know they were in a movie strip maze?
they had to like find out like over the course of it. So like they had to eventually. So like they started off like on the outside curve, and they have to go around until they can be on the inside, and suddenly they basically see this dawning on the horizon, and they realize, oh no, we're trapped in a maze. It was a fun file to work on. I'm going to try and turn everything off and see what happens. So, here's basically what the file kind of looks like. I think I did end up having to collapse it at some point. So yeah. But it's I had to collapse it so that I could like complete edge loops or something. I don't remember my reason. I think it was because the tips of this were breaking. But so it started with this weirdo curve thing. And so I think what I did with that was I used the extra curve modifier. Edit preferences. If you go into your preferences, you can find additional fun curve tools in here. I think they have a category. Do they not? Object. Add object. No. Add curve. There we are. Add curve, extra objects. And upon completion of this, you'll notice that there's a bunch of. Ooh, this got updated. I didn't have all this a month ago. So some of the ones that you can do include a knot, and I think that's what I did. I did a Taurus knot or a braided knot.
You did not do a braid.
It was not a braided knot. Taurus knot plus. And you can already see sort of the idea of a Mobius strip. For those of you who don't know what a Mobius strip is, it's theoretically a single-sided plane in 3D, and it wraps around, and therefore it always has one side. I think I tried to reduce this as much as possible to start with. And then, I don't know why it's so slow. Turn off surface. That's better.
Sorry, I was zooming out. Is this Taurus not an add-on, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
It's add extra.
edit preferences, and then in your add-ons panel, there is a kind of add-on, which is add curves. And here's the various ones. These are also all fun. IVGen and sapling tree generator. Very delightful. But I wanted add curves, extra object. At which point I can say curve, not course. I think the only thing I changed on it was I reduced its resolution a bunch. This is super slow right now. I obviously don't remember what I did. Towards not. Let's just go with the default here. So, in this default, this is on a separate file, which makes it a lot nicer. I'm then going to go into the curve panel, and under geometry, I do not want a bevel. But I do want an extrude. So here I have that strip sensibility, right? The other thing I did was, I think I reduced all this a whole bunch. Simplify. So I think on the creation of it.
Curve is a it's an add-on.
What? Yeah, there's also simplify curve. I think there's a way that in creation of this, my other file is kind of gigantic, so it wasn't really showing it. There we are. 2 spins. Perfect. That's what I want. So I changed the curve resolution really, really low. The reason being, this is not yet a Mobius strip. So I have to like twist it, I think. Does that sound right? So at this point, I'm going to go into edit mode. And I think I need to go into the curve setup and change its cap method or something.
Make it not cyclic.
Yeah, non-cyclical, that's it.
I think you do it in edit mode. I think it's
Alt-C makes it so that it's not connected anymore.
Alright. Exactly what I was going to say. So now I can just extrude this. Control-Shift-Tab to change your snapping mode. Change it to vertex. And this is where I need to start having this twist. So if there is theoretically uh, 45 verts, I think that means 45 divided by 360 is how many times I would have to twist this. So this one I can twist to 1. You can see it up in there. I want this to be 180. So this one would be 180 divided by 45, which is 4.
Can you not just twist with a proportional editing mode?
I could.
Connected proportional editing?
But what would be the fun of
Get it to work on something.
Yeah. Anyways, I just tweaked this manually to a certain degree, after which point it somehow became a Mobius strip, right?
We believe you.
You can use Alt-S to make this skinnier or fatter. And a lot of this was just like modifying some things like this. Like anything that was... I cannot select that one for some reason. Anything that needed just slight adjustments so that it wouldn't overlap. After which point, I added a solidify modifier. I think I added a subsurf first, and then put that first.
So, that part we twisted it, looks like it broke.
No, you broke.
One of the key breaks and then one second.
Oh, did it double break?
You've got two separate rings now.
Oh, yeah. That's not what I want. There. Fixed it.
Fix the other one now.
So that's the thing, is like, your problem is that you can have this be cyclical and it will connect, but it can't be a Mobius strip because that one's an inside and outside. Or you can have it be non-cyclical and have it fixed. So I think what I ended up doing is something to do with affecting like the subsurf.
Crease maybe?
Yeah, it's basically
It'd probably be in the end panel. Look in the end panel. Does it have a median grease weight or something like that near the top?
I don't know, maybe I converted it to a mesh. Let's do that. So at some point maybe I converted it to a mesh. Control Alt C. Alt C.
It's also on the context menu now.
Yeah.
Context menu has it at the bottom of UW.
Mesh. And at this point, I can make this perfectly snapped. And now I add on my subsurf. And I can take these two edges, edge mode, no, they're not merged, and that's kind of the problem. Is I don't think you can merge it because it'll create like an idea. Once, well, it's gonna basically create some sense of normals at that point. So like the normals would be flipped. Edge bevel, edge grease. I don't remember which it is. Didn't that used to be a thing?
Shift C will crease it.
What did I do? Used to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry, you're right. Shift C. Shift E. Oh.
Uses the friendly mnemonic curve ease.
I don't know. Whatever. Let's just do it the ugly way and add some holding edges. Hey, look at that. So eventually what I did is, having done that, I actually just went online and said, I think there's like a maze generator. It's like the first thing I do for everything is just cheat, find it online. And I set this to something where like I unwrapped it, found basically that it was like 400 by 20. You can generate a maze. 200 by 20. And there's my texture.
Oh wow.
I think I set it to a much smaller amount. So maybe it was like 4 by 20. Yeah.
How did you show that to the players?
So I had this, and this texture, I just saved it as an image, and that ended up being something that over here I ended up using as my displacement. So over here it's getting displaced by a texture. That texture is this maze texture. So here is the maze. You can see there's certain areas where I cleaned it up a little to have like a bigger chunk. and also a connection here versus over here, so that it can continue. And then this was theoretically part of the plot, which is like on the paper strip example that you do in grade school. In theory, they had to find like a scroll of Move Earth and cast it, because this was where there wasn't a wall, so they could break the Mobius strip and it all unravels. That was fun.
Did they figure it out?
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. I'm a pretty nice DM. So that is affecting this as part of the modifier stack. This is one of the funnest things in Blender, is just how can you abuse modifier stack. So there's a subdivision surface, and then I'm just displacing with that, with a string. So after that, I brought this that same maze texture into Photoshop, and I bumped it up by 1,000,000, and then I added a bunch of hex stuff. And I'm also still using that in the shading to basically switch between two textures. So number one, here's that maze.png, and that's going to end up driving Isn't there a way to control click, make it the thing that's displayed? So if I just make this the entirety of the surface, oh, maybe it's not. Oh, it's still using that as like the picture. So in over here you can see it. So I took that into Photoshop and I basically made my own thing. But I'm also actually using like a brick material here. So although this is the map that I inevitably showed them, I showed like area 1, 2, 3. The other thing I'm doing that's interesting is like, now that I'm in my 30s, I can't just have fun anymore. You have to figure out how to monetize things. So I've like been writing this as a campaign in like the official lingo and formatting of Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, so that in theory, you know, how can I monetize it later by just selling it on the internet?
Sure. Right to RPG.
Yeah, exactly. So on top of that is just some sort of dumb brick texture, where I'll alternate that is this one. No. No.
You can make a readout node and then zoom in.
So the last time I observed it, Dungeons and Dragons games back in the 70s, has it come online?
Oh yeah, and there's way more Satan now. Is this on like permanent? It's like stuck on knife tool now.
Oh yeah, it's on your settings on the left, or that's the right, left tools. See, yeah.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, they're working on solutions for that because it sucks right now.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. So this is like the overall brick texture. You set it to everything. When we were playing it, they kept making fun of me because I was like trying to get this to load on my shitty laptop, and then somebody was like, "Oh, like this," and they like cut out a Mobius piece of paper, and then they all kept being like, "Wow, that one is great," instead of mine. I like how like it's really rendered in 3D, with physically realistic graphics. Bunch of jerks.
Did you ever actually show them
Yeah.
this visual then?
Yeah, I did.
So, like after they figured out that it was the Mobius?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at some point I like showed they climb up here and they could see what they were looking at off in the distance. But it was fun. It was you know, I'm trying to, my campaigns are very strange and conceptual. I think we're gonna play after the Super Bowl. And it's going to be a game where they're playing, like the campaign takes place on a giant flying pirate ship, and they're all the interns of the pirate ship, the red shirts who go off to die. But we're going to run a very strange campaign where they play from the perspective of the cats that live on the ship. And it's going to be D&D in the lightest of senses. So anyways, it was fun. It was dumb. It was dumb fun. Any questions? Obviously, like, this is not...
Did you have a ball rolling through the maze trying to chase after them?
Oh, that would have been good. I should have done that.
They see it, they notice it comes back by every once in a while over and over again.
That's the same ball, isn't it?
Yeah, well.
But it passes that way.
It was a bunch of, like, dumb labyrinth things. Like, at some point there was a dance sequence where Chili down with the wild gang. Horgle was instead of Hoggle. Yeah. That's the whole project. Anyone else got something to show? Any other questions about this?
That's great.
You guys want to know how to make a grid in Photoshop real fast?
Stroke the guides.
So, to make that like a more official texture, I like to make grids like this. Let's start by making a 128 by 128, not inches, that'll crash Photoshop, pixels.
You missed one of the...
God fucking damn it, Photoshop. This is why... So I'll just duplicate this, transform it, equilaterally a little bit, reverse this. Hey, now I have a black outline and a white outline, right? Merge that down. Select all, copy it, edit, define pattern. Then you can create your gigantic maze. Where did that maze go? So let's say you generated a maze. Sure. You copy that image, create a new Photoshop document, clipboard size. Photoshop is the worst. What did it do? Why can't
I think you created an image in a non-RGB mode, so you can't have layers. Nail it in one.
Yeah. Oh, nope, that's not it. It's this over here.
Thanks, Adobe.
Yeah, nothing says heavy lifting on a computer like defining a 128 pixel pattern.
Adobe updated to be more compliant with like, accessibility features, so the Alt key always goes to the top menu in Windows, which really sucks because Alt is like your eyedropper tool and things like that.
Yeah, switching to RGB crashes this.
Wow.
Substance.
Yeah.
Algorithm that makes substance kind of substance.
Yeah, speaking of which, the good news about that is everyone rallied behind a lot of cool open source things when that happened. And so Blender passed the $25,000 a month milestone for the development fund. A bunch of people started investing in Armory and some of the other in Godot after that. So it's in the long run, it was beneficial for open source tools because for a long time, people have looked at Blender and said, look at all these cool node things. Look at all these cool texture things. The idea of Substance Painter and Substance Designer is just around the corner. Like we can see it in our periphery. And Adobe buying Algorithmic kind of made everyone like form a New Year's resolution around it. So I think we're actually going to see some really beneficial outputs in the open source arena because of that.
Maybe Tom could buy like some smaller companies.
Aren't they working on everything nodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably a step in that direction.
They, I think, shifted it to animation nodes for now, and then everything nodes will probably be ready for 2.81. But yeah, I was really excited about that being pushed.
We're not only for like algorithmic style stuff, but for Houdini style stuff too. which is
Yeah.
really rad,
Yeah.
Let's try this one more time. Clipboard, but let's make it in RGB. And the clipboard doesn't work.
If you define your pattern, it should still be there in your.
I'm trying to copy the maze over. Oh.
Is it a alpha image?
Oh, yeah.
Just do a screen grab of it.
Or if you save the
Snip.
image to your desktop first, that works too.
How far you snip?
I don't know why the windows.
No.
Screws that.
Free full on snip. Oh, never mind. That's not what I want.
I think what it is it's a alpha, so it's solid black with the alpha pixels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just showing up weird when you paste it.
Yeah. No, I have that a lot because it doesn't. It'll paste. Yeah, the alpha just turns black, and that's weird that the copy buffer can't store the alpha. Or
Alright, so here's my thing. Let's change the canvas size to like 20 inches by 20 inches. Sure. Yeah, there's our maze. Sure. And now I'm going to create a new layer. Control-Shift-N. Shift F5 for your fill menu. You can select pattern. Hopefully it's still stored in there. It's not, but we can use this. And there's all your little squares. Let's actually create one that is 128 by 128. Again with the stupid grayscale mode. So I shrink that a little bit. Reverse this one, Control I for invert, merge them, edit, define pattern. Pattern 1, great name. We all agree there. And so now I have
Wrong pattern?
no wrong pattern. Pattern 1. Alright. So now I got all these patterns, right? And oftentimes what I'll end up using this for is just for selection modes. So then you can select by color range, whatever. You can then modify your selections with tracks. Modify. Smooth. Get nice rounded corners. And then I'll turn this layer off and just create something that has this as a mask. Masks are almost always better than using pixels. And I'll fill this one up with a nature pattern. Just fill a layer below it with the same nature pattern, but slightly darker. And that's how you can get something that's a little organic. I don't know, there's a million tutorials for D&D masks, or like...
You went in a different direction than I thought you were going. I thought you were going to add a grid to the maze. Because part of my workflow, I work on a lot of like outfits for characters.
Yeah.
And I found a non-destructive flow using a pattern adjustment there. And with that, you can scale it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you
That
can,
was the other
you can nudge it around with the move tool. Because a lot of my stuff is like, say, like
Yeah,
a
you-
herringbone pattern for a jacket. And it's nice to have it like non-destructively be modifiable and be able to kind of nudge
Yeah,
it around.
pattern
as
overlay.
needed.
No man, destructive is where it's at.
It saves me a lot of time if I need to change something and make a new pattern, splat it in the same position and
Let's get some rock patterns.
So yeah, I guess if you're wrong the first time,
So here you can add like rock pattern. And then of course, I think you can see it if you look at the texture that I had. Yeah, so that's actually what I was doing here. This was pattern overlay. And then with the dumb bevel and emboss. And, you know. When in doubt, use layer mode transfer. I don't know. It's nice and quick and easy in Photoshop. It was fun. It was low effort, enjoyable afternoon of blending. Anybody else got something to show?
Well, you can make a grid really easy in Blender. Like, you just use the brick tool with
Yeah.
the texture and then modify a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, really, what are we even doing in Photoshop when we can have it all through Node? I would like to please impart the altruistic benefits of Blender Development Fund. There's two ways you can support Blender. One is through here. You can just sign up, kind of like NPR or KEXP or PBS. You can just sign up to donate, you know, $5-10 a month. You can find.
I got banned from YouTube this week for promoting Blender.
What?
Yes. And all I did was use Blender's catchphrase 100% free for any use for Blender. And they considered that a copyright violation. Even though I hand typed it in each time, and it doesn't
That's
violate
weird.
the fair use clause. I studied copyright at the Institute for a year from a lawyer.
I imagine Blender didn't copyright claim you. The entire Blender channel got copyright claimed
Yeah.
falsely and was taken
and
down
I
for
was one of the people who informed YouTube that they don't know anything about copyright law, because if they did.
I mean, really, it's the issue of like they don't want to hire a person, like, an actual human being
It's
to.
an algorithm, and the algorithm, I said,
You hit
well,
that
check
one
your
on
algorithm here, because
something
you obviously don't
robotic.
understand copyright law. They sent me two things, one saying that I was being banned from YouTube, and then they told me I was being banned from Google. And then the third message I got from them when I asked them to explain or show me the examples of where I violated it, so do not contact us anymore. Any attempts to will not be accepted. And
I
that was
mean,
it.
I would avoid writing to them because I bet nobody reads that.
Well, first they tricked me into giving me my phone number in order to log back into my account, and that just blocked my
Oh.
other phone from creating a YouTube or Google account. So now I have to get a new phone and a new identity in order to get back onto Google and YouTube.
The other way you can support Blender, by the
But
way.
I still get my Gmail.
Oh, good. So you can donate $6 a month, and you're fancy. And the other way you can help out with Blender, that's a little more selfish, is Blender Cloud. So I think I can log in here.
You can get a free Google phone number.
So Blender Cloud, if you sign up for it, you not only get access to a bunch of their libraries, such as textures, HDRIs, and characters, but you get access to their training. So you can go to their training, and eventually all of their training gets put on Minecraft. Fuck.
We're talking about making money off stuff there,
Yeah.
with Minecraft games.
But they got fancy stuff for specific stuff. Nice walkthroughs. They just added a grease pencil thing. Lots of good resources. And the other thing that's cool about it is, I think, is the Blender Cloud plugin. So if you have Blender Cloud, is that not on yet? Never mind.
I'm going to be testing, current testing on it too.
I don't know. Maybe it's not in yet. Well, you can always do it the ugly way, which is sign in.
Download everything.
Yeah, just go to the library, sign up for 1 month, download all these. But it's a very handy way to get lots and lots of stuff. Ooh.
Talking about money and doing and stuff, how is the way, or what do you recommend as far as like selling assets online, like a kickback percent, or?
I would do Blender Market. I think it's blendermarket.com. This is run off of the CG Cookie guys. They've got a good setup. It seems to be one of the easiest places. The other thing you can do is Gumroad. And it tends to be something where you have to like be doing battle on all fronts, it seems like. In the same way that you post your information to Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Discord and every single thing. You know, you can buy hard ops here, or you can buy hard ops on Gumroad, or you can buy it directly off of his website, so on and so forth. But Blender Market's pretty cool. Obviously, we're going to go to free. Where's free? I think they should hide. I think they should hide this because they donate it like 1% of all their sales, which implies that you can. I think you could reverse engineer the math and find out how well they're doing.
Well, it is day 2 of the month, right?
Oh, maybe that's fair. But yeah, I think you can go like.
I think when you do a search, it lets you narrow it by price.
There's 0.
No, 0 to 20.
What I? Oh, still $1. And if you really want to be a kind-hearted Blender socialist, you can go to blendswap.com. Put all your stuff on there for free.
Do you have to pay money to sign up there?
No, but they do have certain bandwidth restrictions. So, and it's also something where the more you participate, the more you get back out of it. So if you submit a lot of files, I think you get to download more files.
Yeah, one swap, it's kind of unofficial. You have to search for how to get a free one swap account, and then for that you get like 200 megabytes of downloads per month. So every month it refreshes.
A stove.
They just uploaded the one from the
Yeah.
Arctic Mesh or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah.
How good does it give you on your eating need? What are the chances it will burn the food? Seems good.
Look at all this wood. There's lots of places to find big piles of texture.
Where are you right now?
This is Blender Cloud.
Oh.
The one thing I would say is that if you're gonna do one, Blender Cloud is the one that helps Blender the most.
But a lot of the textures are also textures that they needed specifically for like a movie.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but
you're using the same ones that.
Well, but they might not be tiling. They might only have certain ones.
I mean, like one of my old teachers who worked at Flying Lab Software, where I did an internship, he always joked about like the importance of texture, and so he had this dumb like, modeled paper texture that he forced into every project at some place, even if it was just to add a little bit of nuance. But yeah, nice place to cheat. Ooh.
Yeah, I've used some of this stuff from there because, well, I haven't used it from Blender Cloud, but I bought the Tears of Steel DVD.
Yeah, this is also something that's just really great to learn from, as you can. Actually, I have this
Are
down.
you having the weird flickering thing on your end? Is it flickering when you move the mouse over?
Yeah.
Okay. No, because that's
Human. Ugh. have a human brain.
Oh, is that from Tears of Steel?
Yeah, that's the brain.
What else do they have? HDRIs and characters. So you can get a rig going real fast.
Another great place for HDRIs is HDR Haven. Steve used to sell them, and they're really professional quality, and then one day he decided to, at the top there's HDRIs, that's the problem. One day he decided to just make them all free and be donation based. So there's like 300 HDRIs for free, and they're all
That was
just,
following ahead in your. Get it.
He's got textures too.
yeah,
It'd be interesting though,
It went
so-
insane, and there's like lots of. No, but it's really fantastic, and I mean you can donate to him, but like these are all free, and
Yeah.
they're so good.
And you can hook them right in.
Although I mainly use HDRIs to add some variance to the lighting. Not trying to put loud. No. Although I don't light very well either.
Well, if you want photorealistic kinds of renders, you pretty much have to use an HDR. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the image itself. You could just use it for lighting information. But
Well, you can create clouds and stuff.
Texture.
it's just still a subtlety and variance of color and whatnot that you would spend forever.
Image
trying to replicate.
texture.
I feel like the sky node though is underrated.
There's a couple of procedural skies that make it like.
Oh, I meant just straight up the sky node. Because it does a fairly good job of recreating the basic lighting. I mean, you're going to want that variance.
If you're doing something that's particularly metallic, though, you really want something to reflect. Because metals, most of what makes metal look like metal is what it's reflecting. I've tried to make gold look right when it's not reflecting anything, and you just can't. Because most of what it looks like is reflecting the world around it.
Oops.
But we have look dev mode now, which has a lot of little preview HDR elements built in.
Throw that in.
Which is pretty cool. I wish though that they would include those so that you could switch over to Eevee and still use them.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to grab the specular map here. Throw it into the specular channel. And now it's going to be a little different. Duplicate that. Bring in the roughness. And plug it into the roughness.
There's a way to create an environment, light it the way you want, and then save it out as an environment map, and then use that as for reflections and stuff in the projects.
Well, you basically just save from the XR, right? Like you just.
Yeah, what you can do is, I think you can render.
Don't use filmmaker.
Or what is it? You want your camera? Select your camera and change your camera type from perspective to panoramic. Then render to an EXR. So if I render from here. Oh, it didn't work.
I don't think it's a workbench. Or Eevee.
Oh, is it cycles only?
Or panoramic.
Oh, yeah, I think they're working on implementing that, but I'm not sure.
Could just not be in existence now at all. Nope, it's rendering fine. So this is rendering it as a full HDR. So if I throw something in the background here, boop, boop. Open. Always got some of these lying around in my desktop. On my So now this is lighting it using this HDR. And if I render that, it'll render a panorama.
Because I don't really want this to be. Yeah, and I also.
We. Oh, nope, it's not working. But anyways, on this monkey I can keep hooking up all my stuff. Texture. Open. Sort by. Normal map. I'm gonna switch this back to Eevee.
Yeah. Oh no, this is. Well, yeah, right here. This is most of the stuff's for. Well, kind of the spaces.
Alright.
I don't really work with reference. It's, I don't know. It's kind of more. It's not boring. It's more endless.
If I use reference, then I have to be accurate.
So now you can start to see Peeber texture.
Change your mapping to box projection.
¿Dónde? Oh, on this?
On Suzanne, yeah. Change the.
You need an input.
Yeah, change the input to generated. And then the mapping on the texture from needs to be changed to from flat to box.
Yeah, flat to box, and then.
On the texture node itself, change it from flat to box.
Box.
And then the blend, put that to 0.2. It needs the input as well.
The other one also needs it.
Yeah.
Everything needs it. Hey, look at that. Is one of these missing?
They all need to be shifted to box with a 0.2 blend.
Hover copy pasta. What?
You're still typing in the other field.
There we go. 2.2.2.2, box.
Yeah.
Box.
That method, generated box 0.2 blend, can make seamless textures much more easily. I mean, it's not perfectly seamless. You can see where it's fading a little bit. But
Seamless UV, man.
yeah. Right.
I just think this is a weird.
Yeah, you get that on things that are like it basically projects from the top, the sides,
Yeah.
top and bottom sides,
6 sides and then
and other stuff.
Yeah. And then.
Y and Z. And then it blends between them.
But it's arguably better than having a giant seam running through your forehead.
We still don't have the fake depth thing, right?
Depth of field?
No, where it's like use the ambient occlusion.
Oh.
Cavity mapping or whatever.
That's in cycles, but
Yeah.
not in EV yet. There's a cycle.
Have you used the bevel node at all?
If you use ambient occlusion
It's kind of nice, but it's mainly suggested for baking, and I don't really bake stuff. It's most of my stuff.
Yeah, like there's one last thing which is like cavity mapping or something. I can't remember the term, but they have it in Unity, where you use like the ambient occlusion to like draw pixel-based displacement. Nice and fake. What? Yeah, parallax mapping. Eevee does not have parallax mapping yet. Someday.
Well, parallax is also kind of there are different ways to do it.
And if we switch this to, should we do the final thing? If we switch this to cycles, and I think we have to change it in the subsurface.
What are you trying to do? I think you have to turn on experimental stuff. I'm not sure if that still exists. No,
The micro displacements. You know what I'm talking about?
Micro displacements in normal. You just have to turn on the experimental in the render panel.
And then, is it under the object or the
If you
material?
go into the modifier setting.
Alright. Adaptive?
Yeah.
And that should be fine.
Now I need this.
And then it goes to material. Yeah, you need
And this, I put the displacement into displacement.
Yeah. And the displacement should be non-color data. And also go into material.
What?
Material. And it should be down.
Way down here under
Displacement.
That made it mad.
Oh.
Oh, you also need a displacement node in there because it's displacing it based on RGB as XYZ.
Displacement. Let's call it a success.
You need to put it into height.
Sure do. All right. Hey, look at that. That's what I want.
This is the kind of stuff that I just like look up on tutorials.
Yeah, like you do it like.
I learned that because I've done some stuff.
I was gonna say, I guess.
Now it pops out a little.
Like I made
just a little bit.
I made
How much subdivisions do you have on
the
So this is adaptive subdivision. So it's not actually adding more polygons. It's just adding based on pixel data, and it's something that can be done on the fly. As a result, it's a lot faster and cooler.
This is
so this is one of the presets up here, and you can sort of do them like this. So I'm just in the shading panel, which is designed around grabbing textures, seeing your image, seeing how it looks in look dev normally. Normally this would be a look dev. So look dev still shows it as Eevee-ish. And then
That
rendered
really
mode.
isn't much different than Eevee.
Yeah.
Under the hood, it's identical, except that it doesn't use the same lighting.
Yeah.
well, lighting is.
It has like a separate fake environment that's driving. Well, pretty fun stuff.
Did it show you my fireworks?
All right. Thanks for coming to Seabug, guys.